Okay, we have sound, and my name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the Executive Director for the Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated, and today is January the 11th, 2023, and we are at Riviera Beach Preparatory Achievement Academy, and I've got two of my students with me, Calviana and also Keegan. And sir, what is your name?
My name is Donald Gibson.
Okay.
Well, let me start by saying I'm originally from West Palm Beach. I went to Roosevelt High School, which is a historic African American high school here in West Palm Beach. After graduating from Roosevelt, I immediately went to Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. After graduating from Florida A&M, I just came back to West Palm Beach. Was not happy with what I found in regard to job opportunities, just health, civil justice issues. So I decided that I would move to California, where I understood that there was reasonably inexpensive education. So I packed up my little vehicle and I drove out to San Francisco, where I decided to stay after seeing how scenically beautiful, how progressive, and overall very interesting place to live. So that was basically how I started my career. I was a counselor in the Haight-Ashbury and was recruited to work for the City and County of San Francisco as a program analyst, monitoring programs. I was then recruited to work in the psychiatry department as a small clinic director of a 21-day methadone detox clinic.
Okay.
That was my beginning of my activist experience after seeing several activities in San Francisco where people were protesting the wearing of braids by African American women, protest about gay rights, civil rights of individuals who were living in San Francisco in the Bay Area. It was just a very active and responsive community. And I learned there that it was necessary for people to speak up for themselves. And that launched me into retiring from the City and County of San Francisco, and then going to Wright Institute, a school of professional psychology in Berkeley, where I found that a number of the people that were working in that program were attempting to get the job that I was just leaving. So at that point, I recognized that there were some issues that I needed to deal with. My family, my mother got diabetes and was, approaching a stroke, and I decided that I would leave the PhD program and return to West Palm Beach to assist Mom. And therein began my activism in West Palm Beach. I decided that I would develop several programs working in housing, education, as well as civil justice. I got several grants here, primarily from Commissioner Maud Ford Lee, who was a very outstanding and just a prolific politician here in the West Palm Beach area. She had a grant for educating youth. That was something that was very interesting to me. I joined that effort. We ran exceptional student achievement for a few years. I think that's where I met you, Carlton. We were both involved in assisting students at that time.
Right.
You in photography, me in education and reading. Along with that grant, I also got a community service grant through the state of California. There were several initiatives there that were assisting communities, and I was fortunate enough to get one of those grants. I also got a grant from Palm Beach County for education. reading program, reading tutoring. Some of our students were having major problems. Graduation rates were very low. School dropout rates were very high. Just a very deplorable situation for a number of our students. Students of color primarily were suffering some very poor grades, the inability to qualify for higher education. They were not able to succeed in getting to college. So these were some of the efforts that I thought were very important. Affordable housing was also a major area, and I helped to develop the Riviera Beach redevelopment program, where we did affordable housing for first-time home buyers who were attempting to qualify for housing. So we did several charrettes where we interviewed individuals, helped them to qualify for housing finance. And those seminars yielded several new houses that were built in Riviera Beach back before they started the housing boom that we've seen take place since that time. Maura Ford Lee was one of the commissioners that was instrumental in helping to fund those kinds of housing projects, as well as the education programs. Let me just react, first of all, by saying I lived in Oakland, California. I first lived in San Francisco for 3 or 4 years, and then I discovered Oakland, which was much like West Palm Beach. It was green, palm trees, a lot of black folks, a very attractive and progressive environment where some of the disparities were real clear. It was clear that even in Oakland, California, there were the disparities between black folks' education and white folks' education.
Right.
There were a number of instances where black students were, here we had busing, there you had financial exploitation. People who lived in the hills of Oakland, which was primarily people who had more wealth. The higher your wealth, the higher up the hill you went.
Okay.
And then low income were living in the Richmond, low class, low poverty stricken Oakland, California.
Okay.
There were a lot of potential riots that occurred as a result of this great wealth gap, where people were protesting because it was really transparent that, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And people then began to understand that there were things that were not right, that there was a disproportionate degree of poverty that was not necessary. There was the lack of jobs, the lack of education, the lack of upward mobility as a result of those two things, and people suffered from that. So that was very clear to me that that was not only happening in Oakland, but it was also happening in my hometown. Deprivation, if you will, that occurred in Oakland was also happening in West Palm Beach. As a result of being a counselor, a therapist, being trained in things like brief therapy by Fish and Weakland, who were strategists, tacticians. They did things for the Army, for the military. They also did things for behavioral sciences. So they came up with the theory of brief therapy, how to rapidly solve problems by identifying what is the problem,
Right.
how is it a problem, and in what ways does the problem manifest itself in the lives of the individuals. And that happened in family marriage counseling, it happened in drug treatment programs, it was also going on in employment. Okay, so as a result of being in that very volatile environment, I established a role of trying to be a problem solver. So I presented at the NIDA Conference, National Institute of Drug Abuse in Seattle, Washington, where we exposed these kinds of problems and the way to solve those problems. So that started a lot of my activism. So when I left the PhD program and decided, okay, it's a PhD or you go home and help your mom, I made the decision to go home and help mom. When I arrived back in West Palm Beach, I found that not a whole lot had changed. There was still a lack of job opportunities, still the educational deprivation. The segregation had ended with integration, but integration was largely born on the backs of black students in neighborhoods. They were bussed out of the neighborhoods and sent out to the outlying schools, which were predominantly white schools, where they ended up being the extreme minority. And being the extreme minority, they found themselves challenged by not only the other students there, but also by the institution itself. Because they came from schools that were, let's say, C, D, F schools, and now they are attending A, B schools, they found themselves on the short end of the stick. They found themselves being suspended for minor situations. One of the things I did was to start writing grants.
Can you put that on sound?
Start writing some programs that could solve some of those issues. Because I saw those kinds of things happening here in West Palm Beach, the same kinds of things that were happening in Oakland, California, I decided to problem solve by approaching the county, the city, for funding for reading and tutoring programs that I established in several of the parks and several of the schools, basically the middle schools and elementary schools in the area. Mangonia Park, Riviera Beach, West Palm Beach, Lake Worth. We had about 10 different programs. At the time, we were funded to provide these educational facilities. We ran the program out of the old Roosevelt Full Service Center at that time, and it was, I think, a relatively successful program. There are several students whose names I won't call, but who have been able to succeed and be successful as a result of those programs. Excuse me. So the activism turned into, again, public housing, affordable housing, education programs through Project Link Up, which was one of the first computer training programs that was launched here in West Palm Beach area right after the Full Service Center started. So Project Link Up, which was a computer-based education program that was designed to help students learn to read. I found that reading was one of the essential ingredients to success for most students. So we concentrated on reading and reading skills. Right. I later decided that I would not only launch these little programs, but I myself would educate myself and become a teacher. So I took several courses through the universities, through University of Phoenix, FAU. I then decided that I would become a teacher. So I got a teacher certification. I also became a reading teacher, got a reading endorsement as to how to use strategies to help students understand language skills and how to communicate. I was very impressed with the fact that when students learn how to read better, they were able to learn more. Mm-hmm. They were able to do more. as a result of having those reading skills.
And the foundation.
Those listening skills.
Right.
And build a stronger foundation.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. So the activism turned into, as I said, several programs. The program in housing, I was a founder of that Riviera Beach Redevelopment Agency. I also worked with a couple of other programs. One that I want to highlight now, because it is where I am currently for the last, this is 23, for the last 16 years, I was asked by a gentleman by the name of Samuel Bruce McDonald to work with some of the retired teachers at the old Roosevelt High School to give them a chance to figure out what it was that they would like to do themselves now that they have been retired. So I facilitated some workshops with several of these individuals. Floyd Andrews, who's deceased now, Gwen Ferguson, Ann Nelson, just a variety of Mrs. Nelson, just a variety of salt of the earth individuals who had a lot to give back. So we created ARLIC. It's called the African American Research Library and Cultural Center.
Okay, and what exactly is that?
Basically, it's a nonprofit 501c3 that is designed to develop the history of the African American community in the Palm Beach County area. We are looking at the history of West Palm Beach and the impact that African Americans have had. I'm not sure if your audience is aware that West Palm Beach was basically developed out of the Sticks. And the Sticks was a place in Palm Beach where when Flagler was building the Breakers Hotel and developing Palm Beach, he needed a workforce. And the workforce were Chinese and African Americans. The African Americans lived on the ocean, and they built their little city out of driftwood and whatever they can find, basically, and that's why they called it the Sticks.
Okay.
It was a lean-to, just a very crude little city that the African Americans built on the beach. That turned into an enclave where at some point the shantytown was set on fire after a lot of the residents were invited over to a big party in West Palm Beach, and they looked over and across Lake Worth to find that, oh my God, there's a fire going on over there. That's close to the Sticks. That's our homeland over there.
Right.
So in short, they were burned out.
Right.
And they were assigned to live in one little section of West Palm Beach called Pleasant City. Not by accident, the streets in Pleasant City had the names of beautiful, contentment, names that were intended to calm down the people who were at this point very, very angry that they had been, wiped off the beach and sent to a small developing community in West Palm Beach. West Palm Beach, of course, at that time was not as integrated as it is today. There were a number of restrictions. You could not go across Lake Worth without a permit. You had to verify that you worked for one or two of the millionaires that lived in Palm Beach. So there were all those kinds of restrictions.
Right.
There were very few jobs in West Palm Beach. My mother, my father, both came from people who were themselves transplanted to West Palm Beach. My grandmother worked as a domestic in Palm Beach, cooking and cleaning for the white folks that she worked for. There were very few jobs downtown. My mom, who graduated from the old Roosevelt High School, left West Palm Beach immediately after graduating, just like I did, went to New York and enrolled in design school. She wanted to be a fashion, not only a model, but she also wanted to design and make clothes. So she did that and then returned to West Palm Beach after a couple of years of getting her, you know, how they were industrial education programs during that time. But Mom came back to be an elevator operator in a 3-story department store on Clematis called Belk's Department Store. But that gives you an idea of how limited, how restricted activities were for African Americans in the West Palm Beach area. At that time, there were very few other immigrants. There were very few Latin, very few Chinese or Asian individuals, Oriental individuals, very few Cubans, very few Haitian or Jamaican individuals living in West Palm Beach at that time. So West Palm Beach was just a very limited environment for a lot of people. The wealthy were getting along fine. This area was designed basically for those with money and means. So it was a very difficult struggle. The institutions were, as I said, basically segregated up until I think 70, 71 is when full integration occurred and the black kids were bussed out of their local schools to the outlying schools, as I mentioned earlier. This had a dramatic impact on the success of schools, the success of individuals who were now, as I said before, excuse me, now in an environment where they were probably A-B students at the black school, well, now they're D and F students at the white school. They were not able to participate in extracurricular activities because they were bused again into outlying schools, so couldn't participate in band, basketball, football, chorus, glee club, could not. It is first, as I said, in terms of the problem-solving model that was taking place in Stanford University. What is the problem? First, identifying the problem.
Right.
How is it a problem? Means, how does the problem manifest itself in your life? And then the final question would be, what would it look like if the problem were solved? And I think that gets to your question. What do we do now? Again, one of the things that we have to do is recognize that there is an issue, that there are still some vestiges, if you will, of racism that have not been addressed. There are things that are going on, like what we've experienced lately with the whole insurrection movement, with the whole Black Lives Matter movement. Now we have the whole issue of Roe v. Wade being overturned, the Voting Rights Act being blocked, okay? And these are issues that affect a wide range of individuals. We know now that there are groups of individuals who don't want to see certain groups succeed. You have a variety of these kinds of issues going on right now, from the initiative by our ex-governor Rick Scott, talking about doing away with and eliminating Social Security, which is one of the bedrock foundations for people who work to put money into a trust fund and able to get monthly payments from the money that they have put into those institutions, like Social Security. There are the things that are going on within our state with our Governor DeSantis, talking about banning books that speak to a variety of issues, books by people like Nikki Giovanni, books that reflect and speak to the various issues. We have to address those things, like the banning of books, like the gerrymandering that's going on, like the things that we know are problems for certain groups, and the reluctance of groups like some people in the MAGA Republican group that are seemingly attempting to bring down democracy. And you wonder if they're really trying to bring down democracy, or they are just not happy that they lost this one. Okay? And as a result of losing this one, they want to destroy the whole thing. I don't think they want to really destroy the whole thing. I think they just want to win. Okay? And in winning, they want to take things back to a time like the 50s, when things were segregated, when things were designed to help the wealthy. We've already seen the fact that part of our government is very comfortable giving subsidies and monies back to the very wealthy, but reluctant to feed the poor and provide subsidies for individuals who have major needs in housing, in food, in education, so that these folks are not dependent but are independent. The whole case with immigration, and the fact that immigration is something that we should all want to support. That's what the country was built on, okay? And we have enough territorial, space within the country, especially in the interior, to allow these individuals to come into our country, help us develop. They need jobs, we have jobs. They have a need and a desire to better themselves, and it should be okay for us to support them in that effort.